This podcast may contain explicit language. It's called a hustle, sweetheart. Zootopia is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
I mean, you have moved like a sloth for many years, so this is not surprising in the least, but yeah. Do you also want to work for the DMV? Oh, you're going to keep up the bit. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Tonight for our 301st episode, we discuss the animated noir comedy Zootopia from 2016, celebrating its 10th anniversary, directed by Byron Howard and Rich Moore, written by Jared Bush and Phil Johnston, cinematography by Nathan Warner and Brian Leach, music by Michael Giacchino, editing by Fabian Rowley and Jeremy Milton, starring Ginnifer Goodwin as Judy Hopps, Jason Bateman as Nick Wilde, Idris Elba as Chief Bogo, Jenny Slate as Dawn Bellwether, Nate Torrance as Benjamin Clawhauser, Bonnie Hunt as Bonnie Hopps, Don Lake as Stu Hopps, Tommy Chong as Yax, J.K. Simmons as Leodore Lionheart, Octavia Spencer as Mrs. Otterton, Alan Tudyk as Duke Weaselton, and Shakira as Gazelle. Background for the movie: Zootopia was released on March 4th, 2016. On a budget of roughly $150 million, Zootopia would gross over $1 billion at the worldwide box office for 2016, finishing at number 4 for that year. Dad, I assume, did you look at the notes? Did you find what the other 3 movies that finished ahead of it that year were?
I know one was a Marvel film.
Technically, they're all sequels. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
And yes, one of them was a Marvel film.
I just saw that it was 4th, and I did not pay attention to who was the other 3.
Okay, so number 1 was Captain America: Civil War. I know you remember specifically everything about that film. Rogue One, Star Wars, which is a prequel, sequel, kind of in between various different episodes movie, which I think has aged well by comparison to some of the other movies of that era. I think it's the one that people go back to and say, of the newer Star Wars films, that's probably the one that they liked the most, or that added to the story the most. And then obviously was expanded upon recently with the Andor TV series. And then 3 was Finding Dory, which is the direct sequel to Finding Nemo. Critics were almost universally positive on the film at the time, with most singling out its themes for praise. Zootopia was included in the AFI Top 10 of the Year in 2016, and it won the award for Best Animated Feature for that year. Since its release, Zootopia has had a streaming TV show spin-off and a overwhelmingly successful sequel in 2025. I think it might have been the highest grossing film of last year. If it wasn't, it was just because it basically, the calendar year ended and didn't have enough time, but I want to say it's like one of the highest grossing animated films ever. Yeah, and it was actually decent for what it's worth. I did recently see it. So Zootopia currently holds a 98% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 78 score on Metacritic, and a 3.8 out of 5 on Letterboxd. However, as we cannot do this by ourselves, we bring in our first-time celebrity guest, our newest person on the show, a superfan, making his first appearance on the show. Please give a warm round of applause for Ryan H.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on the show now, finally. I've heard many things about your listening habits and your being a fan of the show. I guess if we were to slightly do some interviewing here, it's very rare that we've talked to people that are actually fans of the show. Is there anything in particular that you, or that has drawn you to us, other than the fact that you obviously have a relationship to us through your parents working for the firm?
Well, I like the movies you guys review, like Heat of the Night, stuff like that.
Sure. Okay. That's a surprising one to pull just like randomly. Is that like a favorite of yours automatically, or is, I don't know. I mean, not many kids your age, and I know that you're, under 18. I won't reveal exactly what age for your own safety and protection, I suppose, but are watching films from the 1960s.
I prefer MASH, but that's a show.
Fair enough. But that's also the 70s, is it not?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
So Heat of the Night is as old as my wife.
Yeah, that's very true. 1967.
Yep.
Well, moving into our episode for the evening, Zootopia. Now, this is one that I saw for the Oscars about 10 years ago, back when I was watching just about everything that was nominated in this category. I've since kind of stopped, especially because I think over the weekend, Dad, you and I watched about 25, 30 minutes of K-pop Demon Hunters, and we're like, okay, we get it, but I don't think we really need to go much further than this.
True.
Yeah, I just need to basically understand why people think it's popular and then move on, because, oh boy, that is not for me. That is not made with me in mind at all. The songs are catchy. I'll grant it that, but everything outside of that, I don't really need that in my life. But Dad, had you seen the film at all before?
No, I had not. This is a first-time watch. Actually, for the Oscars, I watched Zootopia 2 before I watched Zootopia.
Fair enough. Now, Ryan, you had said before we kind of started here that you'd watched it a couple of times. What's your recollection of the film? Is it something that was kind of a favorite of yours, or just something that you'd seen a couple of times and whatever?
Seen a couple times, whatever.
Okay.
Never thought it was all that great. Watching it now is pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I think it holds up well, actually, from an adult perspective, maybe more than for kids, because it's got a lot of deep themes. One of the themes that is obviously like right to the forefront is the way that certain animals interact, because they're supposedly trying to forego their animalistic nature. I think that's the conceit or the premise of the movie, is that they're all living in this semi-harmony in a kind of humanistic state. They all act like humans, more or less, and are doing human jobs, etc. But because of that, the differences between different animal types and their predator versus prey status brings in a lot of stereotypes and prejudice into the film that I think is built out in the thematic elements here. So, Dad, let's start with you. Do you think this is an adequate, analogous context for the prejudice and stereotypes that are presented in the film?
I do. It took me back to my college sociology classes, and we did a unit on eugenics, which is the study of race and how you can manipulate race and etc., and selective reproduction and such to create genetic superhumans and such.
Nothing like discussing race among 3 generations of straight white males on this program, but we can't do any better than that. But I would say it's kind of like our discussion a few weeks ago when we did Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and we were talking in that discussion to open up how good science fiction can translate certain things that are, because of the analogy, we can discuss deeper topics and deeper questions in a way that we can't always do if we just bring it to real life. It takes a certain level of fantasy to allow us to look at ourselves in a deeper way. And I think one of the reasons why this movie has resonated with critics as much as it has, to the tune of the 98 scores on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, is that it's taking some very deep topics and through the use of animation, it kind of softens what would otherwise be a very edgy topic.
And it's not just racism and stereotypes, but it also exemplifies political manipulation of the subject for political purposes.
Certainly, there's a lot of governmental or political corruption running through the course of this movie. I think that's at the heart of it. But before we get too much further on what the film is actually about, do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. Zootopia is an animated comedy about a city where animals live and work just like humans. The story follows Judy Hopps, voiced by Ginnifer Goodwin, a small-town rabbit who becomes the first bunny police officer in the big city of Zootopia. Judy is excited to prove herself, but she quickly learns that the job is harder than she expected. When several predatory animals go missing, she volunteers to solve the case, even though no one believes she can handle it. To crack the mystery, Judy teams up with a clever but untrustworthy fox named Nick Wilde, voiced by Jason Bateman. As they follow clues across the city, they uncover a conspiracy that threatens the peace between predators and prey.
Thank you. Now, the film to me is about a lot of things, but since it's taking on these deep moral topics and examining them through a softer lens, Ryan, I don't know if you've covered in school yet much political philosophy, but have you heard of either Rousseau or Thomas Hobbes?
I have not, but we have covered early 1700s and Revolutionary War politics.
Sure. Okay. So, Dad, if I were to bring in Hobbes and Rousseau into this situation, what would you think I might say? Since you love political philosophy.
Yeah. Kind of like I love to have foot fungus.
Doesn't everyone?
Apparently.
The movie is about the social contract. It's betraying our state of nature so that we can live in harmony with one another by foregoing our baser instincts and our pure sense of liberty for a more restrictive version of liberty, but in order to have a functioning society. Because if you allowed everybody to have the capability to live out their entire freedom, to that extent, everybody could murder everyone else, because then you'd be the only one left. In a society, you do have to forego certain things in order to live within the boundaries and the rules that are given there. And that's very much what this film is about, at least to me.
Okay.
All right, Dad, come on in.
Well, okay. The social contract. Okay, I understand all that. And to some extent, yes, I studied it. I didn't like it, but I studied it. And I think to some extent, the social contract really is more Locke, because that's really this particular case, this is more Locke, which is establishing.
Locke never talked about a social contract. Rousseau explicitly titled his book The Social Contract.
I understand, but Locke at least put parameters in place of how people will behave and establish a working government. Locke was much more realistic. Rousseau was live in the sky, whoopee, wonderful world we live in, you know.
He was not a utopian philosopher.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, Hobbes was much more realistic, cruel, brutish.
He was cynical. He wasn't necessarily realistic.
Cynicism is realism.
Oh, God. Talking like the 15-year criminal defense attorney.
Okay. 17, but we won't parse words.
Yeah, well, you've been out of it longer than you were in it at this point.
True.
Ryan, did you have any thoughts on what the film is about to you to jump in here?
Well, I think the film is softening a hard topic. It's obviously softening racism, stereotypes, and all that. I think you guys covered most of it, but I think it is softening a harder topic for and political stuff. It's softening that, kind of like
Fair enough.
teaching a hard topic but softening it out.
Essentially a parable, if you will. Using a story to teach a greater meaning or a deeper theme.
Yeah.
So you could say that the makers of Disney are like Jesus Christ then.
Well, if you ask him.
I don't think.
I'm sure that'll go over well at his parochial school. We'll cut that one out and throw it up on socials.
Yeah.
All right. Did you know? Originally, the film focused on Nick Wilde. Test audiences said they struggled to connect emotionally with him and felt more drawn to Judy Hopps. So the story was adjusted. So basically, there's a whole version of this movie that they just cut and redid.
That's not unusual for Disney.
And especially for those that work in some of the animation, like Pixar's famous for scrapping and redoing and completely changing whole pieces of the story until they find whatever the right thing they think is. Did you know? Nick Wilde's design is heavily based on the title character of Disney's Robin Hood from 1973, who is also a fox.
Yes.
Have you ever seen that one, Ryan?
No, I haven't.
Oh, that was a staple of my youth. That and Peter Pan, The Great Mouse Detective, The Rescuers. Those were like staples of my early childhood. The Lion King, although you had to skip the section where Mufasa dies because that was too sad. Did you know? Chief Bogo's name is taken from the Swahili word mbogo, meaning buffalo. So there you go.
Interesting.
Did you know? Duke Weaselton is voiced by Alan Tudyk, who also voiced the Duke of Wesselton, often mispronounced as Weaselton in Frozen. Dad, I know that you're a huge Frozen fan. Did you know that?
No, but I knew Alan Tudyk was involved in a lot of these films.
That is true. In contrast to the character of the latter, Judy mispronounces Duke's last name as Wesselton in this movie. So that's some good fourth wall breaking and meta commentary for you. And finally, did you know? During her train ride to Zootopia, before Judy chooses Gazelle, she listens to various artists on her music device. These include The Beagles, Black Sable, Katy Perry, Destiny's Cub, U2, U spelled E-W-E, Fleetwood Yak, Fur Fighters, Guns and Rodents, Hyena Gomez, Canine West, and Mick Jaguar.
Yeah.
Come on, I would have thought I would have gotten at least one groan for just the crappy puns here.
I did point that out because I do listen to a lot of those artists.
Okay.
Kind of brings back the whole era of bedrock where everything was, on the Flintstones. Stoney Curtis and...
Oh, sure. Okay. I was going to say, where were you going with that?
Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah. Okay. Puns aside, that looks like a good spot for our first break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 302nd episode, we welcome our returning celebrity guest, Kristen Battistella, to the show to discuss the classic Western The Searchers from 1956, celebrating its 70th anniversary. Directed by John Ford, written by Frank S. Nugent, cinematography by Winston C. Hawk, music by Max Steiner, editing by Jack Murray, starring John Wayne, Jeffrey Hunter, Vera Miles, Ward Bond, and Natalie Wood. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Since our guest has nothing to promote tonight, we'll just skip right ahead to best performance. Dad, who did you have down?
I had a hard time differentiating these, but I had Byron Howard and Rich Moore, but I also had Jared Bush and Phil Johnston. The story itself is what I really thought was the best performance overall. But considering that the directors promoted or pitched several ideas and set the template for the story itself, and then the writers took it from there, I had a hard time differentiating what part of this was written by whom and how it was created. So I'm going to give best performance to all four for ultimately how the story was developed and adapted.
I think that I have some criticisms that I'm sure we're going to go through for the story overall. I think it is a good piece of narrative, and it's doing a lot to analyze a very difficult topic through some rather familiar genre forms. Like I mentioned kind of in the lead into this that it's somewhat of a comedic noir caper kind of thing. I mean, it's got the detective story as the background. It's kind of got some noirish elements without it being black and white, which usually isn't done in an animation setting, but it makes it feel somewhat familiar. And so the story is much more easily digestible. However, I think there are some nitpicks that I have with that, which we'll get to. But for me and my money, I went with Jason Bateman. I think he carries a good portion of this film. He's supposed to be somewhat of an anti-hero, but he's likable. He's not exactly a protagonist. He's not an antagonist, but his appeal at the center of the movie has to be one where you initially like him, then you dislike him, and you're kind of pinging back and forward. But he also provides some of the emotional undercore of the film, which, yes, you can pin part of that on the story and kind of the story making, but I think within the voice acting that he's trying to accomplish here, you can see some of the vulnerability, but you can feel a lot of different things within this performance. And so for overall, I thought he was the strongest for my money. Ryan, who did you have?
I have J.K. Simmons as the first mayor. I think, at first he's a great mayor, great guy, but then towards the end of the movie he becomes corrupt and things like that. And I think he really shows the nice and bad side of politics and how people can really be off camera. And he really brings out that voice aspect you're looking for.
Sure. I mean, obviously J.K. Simmons has been a voice actor for a very long time, and he's a somewhat recognizable voice anymore, given the amount of various commercials and other things that he's been a part of. But
sounds a lot like the yellow Eminem to me, but I don't know.
Yeah, from a long time ago. He hasn't done that in probably 10 years at least, I would say.
I thought he was still doing it.
No, he hasn't been doing it for a very long time. But anyway, now the mayor, I guess Mayor Lionheart in here, presents an interesting scenario. He is trying to minimize the danger that is to the public, but he's doing it under a cloak and dagger type of situation instead of being transparent. I guess, since you brought it up, Ryan, this reminds me a little bit of kind of the public messaging around COVID, which I don't know how much you want to relive that era of a difficult time growing up in that. But there was so much that the public felt like they didn't know about the situation ongoing at the time. And to be fair, in hindsight, we were very misinformed. So was what the mayor doing correct, or could it be seen that even through trying to protect the public, he was doing things that really didn't serve the public?
I think it's a little bit of an in-between thing. You can obviously see he was trying to help the public, but I think transparency would have helped a lot with that.
The problem ultimately is, if I may point out, who gets to decide it? I mean, transparency allows the public to make that decision of what they should or shouldn't know. And I have a problem sometimes with the whole concept of being a big brother or a benevolent dictator, or however you want to phrase it, of determining what should or shouldn't be available information for the mass audience.
I suppose that's fair. I think that there can be bad decisions made for good reasons, and that happens all the time. I think ultimately here in this type of situation, especially because people were searching for missing loved ones, not informing the public takes on a whole new meaning and a whole new light in this particular context. But I think, again, in many similar situations, you can't have one unilateral person trying to control a narrative. You have to let people kind of know and figure out where they want their opinion to go, even if somewhat of the opinion is controlled by other forces that are beyond your own control.
So the term "the ends justify the means."
I think you could also put in there Shakespeare with "all's well that ends well," but even then, I don't know if that's entirely true.
Okay, the term "the ends justify the means" is there's two places, one origination, one more modern application. Anybody want to take a guess as to where it originates?
Where are you going with this?
Where did they start?
Why does it matter?
Because I think it makes a difference.
I have no idea.
Well, one is in Proverbs, and then it was brought back and applied by Abraham Lincoln.
Lincoln.
So it raises a very ethical consideration for how you use it, or how that phrase is utilized.
It's interesting that you bring up Lincoln, since I think there are a lot of people that are trying to somewhat retroactively apply the benevolent dictator title to Lincoln.
Yeah.
And I think I'm at least sympathetic to some of the arguments.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Best secondary performance here. I had Ginnifer Goodwin. I think she does a good job of, again, making this character likable and vulnerable, presenting kind of this person who's fighting against the odds character that becomes the backbone of the story. And I think that there's a really good chemistry between the two lead characters that ultimately helps favor this story or bring it out to the forefront. That if not for their partnership, if not for their friendship, ultimately, I'm not sure that the movie works.
Yeah, I had her as my secondary as well. I think she's likable. I think she is the type of character that people want to root for throughout the film.
I think it's also a bit of a fine line. There are characters very similar to this that you could see as type A that annoy or rub people the wrong way because they're so over anxious. Like they push their anxiety or their planning, their organization, their desire, their ambition on other people. And that becomes kind of grating. But I think they do a good job of pushing her up to an edge, but then recognizing that she has her own flaws or her own failings and bringing it back from that point. Ryan, what did you have here?
I had her as well. I think everyone loves a good underdog story, and those odds really made her an underdog. Her odds, in my opinion, were close to none.
Or in this case, an under rabbit.
Moving to most charismatic, I had the sloth, Raymond S. Percy, as Flash. And I will already tell you that my most indelible moment, because it's the number one thing. It was the number one thing in the trailer. Then when you watched the film back 10 years ago, it was the number one thing I remembered about the film. And 10 years later, it was one of the few things that I could tell you about the plot of this movie. So if that's not most charismatic to me, that's not most indelible, I don't know what else.
My most charismatic is Alan Tudyk, because he always has a really great take, and he's a really great pirate.
Gar, Steve. Anyway, Ryan, who did you have?
I had Flash as well. I think I agree with everything you said about him.
It's just a really good character in the middle of this, and you don't think it'll work that well, but even Dana gets some cheap laughs at the beginning of this episode from using that cadence.
All they did was they took the old Bob Elliott and Ray Gould bit, slow talkers of America. So my guess is that these are people who were involved in the production of this, that were fans of classic radio growing up.
If you say so. Not everybody has to listen to Jack Benny and have hours upon hours of radio programs on their computer that my mother mistakes for porn.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, moving on. Best scene, I have 5 nominees here. I have Childhood Bully. I have Popsicle Scam. I have the DMV, which is the scene we were just talking about. I have the Jaguar Chase. And then I have Blueberries, which is the final, like, reveal scene, the staged confession. Do we have any other nominees that you'd like to recognize here?
I would like to divide out a couple.
Okay.
New Mayor.
Okay.
And then Farm to Reconciliation, which is her going from her farm with her parents to reconciling with Nick.
I mean, I treat those as 2 very different scenes.
Yeah, but it's really all about her racing to town and figuring out she needs to try to get him back involved so she can try to save the day. And I consider that one scene. It's a long scene, but still.
No, because they're 2. There's a clear dividing
line
line between
make it 2.
those.
I don't care.
Whatever. All right, so we have Childhood Bully, Popsicle Scam, DMV, Jaguar Chase, New Mayor, Reconciliation, and Blueberries. Out of these, what is the best scene?
I have Reconciliation, because to me, that says more about race and race belief or theory or how one behaves, which is when you recognize the fault of some stupid behavior or belief you hold, apologies and making amends can carry the day and resolve a lot of hostility and pain.
Ryan?
I have Blueberries because I think you can see the mayor. She realizes her mistake and wishes she could take it back, but she couldn't.
I have DMV simply because it's the funniest fucking scene in this movie.
I have that as my favorite scene.
Mine is Blueberries just because of the resolution of the movie. Like, to have that, I think it does a good job of doing that kind of slow reveal. It's been clearly leaving clues for you throughout the entire movie that there's something to go about this. And the staging of it, everything's there. But to pull that kind of trick at you at the end, I think is not only clever, but it has kind of a winking nod to the audience in that moment, because everything is there for you to be able to understand and guess it. But I think the first time that you watch this, it's still kind of like, oh, they did that. And then it feels like you're kind of in on the joke too.
I had figured it out the minute I saw the making the little pills or bullets, whatever you want to call them, vials that went into the gun, and saw them being blue, and then going, blueberries. Yep, that's going to end up happening. They're going to swap them out.
Yes, because you're just smarter than everybody else.
Well, at least you would acknowledge that.
Sure. Ryan, what was your favorite scene?
I think mine was Childhood Bully. I think it's the funniest. Not because of the bully, but because of the conversation her and her parents were having. And then her father saying that they settled, and then the mother saying they settled hard. I found that comical. So that was my favorite.
Yeah, the parents do a good job of being some of the least supportive characters in this entire thing. That feels true to life.
Yeah, whatever.
Again, most indelible moment for me is the DMV.
I had Blueberries.
I had Childhood Bully.
You had it for both? Okay. All right, so that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the greatest movie of all time podcast show page. that has the grades we've done so far for all 272 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Eric Dane, 53, American actor. Grey's Anatomy, The Last Ship, Euphoria. Billy Steinberg, 75, American songwriter. Like a Virgin, True Colors, Eternal Flame. Frederick Weissman, 96, American documentarian. Titicut Follies, Ex Libre. Tom Noonan, 74, American actor. Manhunter, Heat, Last Action Hero.
So, in between seasons 2 and 3 of Euphoria, he is the second major character to have passed away, along with Angus Cloud, that has passed away in the interim, waiting between seasons 2 and 3. But, Dad, do you have any idea what Euphoria is?
No.
Okay. And, Ryan, have you ever seen an episode of Euphoria? I hear it's popular among the younger age crowd.
No, I've watched an episode or two of Grey's Anatomy, but not Euphoria.
Okay. I have never personally watched Grey's Anatomy. I really never felt the urge to watch it, but that's fair. He was not a significant character on the show, but he did have some reoccurrence. He was Jacob Elordi's dad in the series. And that show, I think, is coming back for its third season, given how much all of the actors or people in it have exploded into bigger and better careers. It's kind of amazing that they were even able to do another season of it, but I believe that's coming back in the next couple of months. As far as Billy Steinberg here, I don't know him personally, but all three of these songs are fairly like chart-topping songs that I've heard of before. Have you heard of any of these, Ryan?
I have not. I usually stick to my normal artists.
Such as?
Queen, David Bowie. Oh, classic rock. All the way up to the 1990s I listen to.
Not far off, though, from that time frame. Like a Virgin was Madonna.
Yep.
True Colors was... why am I drawing a blank?
Yeah, I can think of her.
Yes. She's been doing a commercial
Cyndi
for
Lauper.
Cyndi Lauper, and then Eternal Flame was the Bengals.
Bangles, I think it was, with an A. But all songs of the 80s.
Yep.
So,
early 80s. So when I was in high school.
Yes, that's
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Ancient times.
Very much so. But either way.
We used to tie our dinosaurs up in the back of school.
But we recognize these here fondly for their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's go to best funniest lines. I will start with Chief Bogo. Life isn't some cartoon musical where you sing a little song and all your insipid dreams magically come true. Feels like something my dad would tell me. Just after he told me to look up gullible in the dictionary.
Well, I convinced my mother that gullible wasn't a real word. It wasn't in the dictionary.
Gullible is not a real word.
Gullible, excuse me, I misspoke. Gullible is not a real word. It doesn't exist in the dictionary.
Okay. So you were smarter than your mother. It didn't take much. All right, who's up?
Do you have a line?
Best/funniest lines, I have the one that Judy's parents said, because I found that hilarious.
Mr. Big, we may be evolved, but deep down, we are all still animals.
Your Brando needs a lot of work.
Yeah,
it's much more of a whisper instead of a crackling like horse. But anyway, Nick Wilde. It's called a hustle, sweetheart. Go ahead, Dad.
Judy Hopps. I came here to make the world a better place, but I think I broke it. Chief Bogo. Don't give yourself so much credit, Hopps. The world has always been broken. That's why we need good cops like you.
Nick Wilde. What do you call a 3-humped camel? Flash. I don't know. What do you call a 3-humped camel? Pregnant.
You have to draw it out more, but okay.
I didn't want to be here forever.
That's where the humor is. Come on. Young Hopps, referring to Gideon Gray with determination. Well, he was right about one thing. I don't know when to quit.
Judy Hopps. Wait, they're all sloths? You said this was going to be quick. Nick Wilde in mock surprise. Are you saying that because he's a sloth, he can't be fast? I thought in Zootopia anyone could be anything.
I'm out.
Okay, Nick Wilde. Never let them see that they get to you. And finally, Chief Bogo. There are some new recruits with us I should introduce, but I'm not going to because I don't care. All right. That brings us to the Stanley Rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out. So roughly 2021 to today, what is the legacy of this film as shared between two equal yet separate groups, the industry and the audience, 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second here?
I'll go first. For the industry, there was a movement, and they did do a spin-off TV show, and they did do a sequel, but it was outside of the 5 years, but probably in large part because of COVID and other stuff. So it may well have been done within the 5 years, but for outside circumstances, but who knows. So from the industry, I'm at a 4 because I think it did have some legs and popularity. For the public, I think it was big in the moment, and it's kind of faded as time's gone by. It does not have the same legs as some of the Disney films, although the Office poll established that about 50% of the Office had seen the film. But it was not so memorable that everybody could identify any of the voice actors or anything about it. So I'm at a 3.5 for the public. So I'm at a 7.5 overall.
I think you're a little light on the public. I would go with the 4 here, but I really don't have much to add on the industry side. I had a 4 there as well, 4 and 8. I guess my overall argument why it's just a little bit more popular is buoyed on the backing of that the sequel did ridiculously well. Now, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it was to the Chinese market and it sold a Southeast Asian actor or voice actor as a significant component of this last film. And traditionally, whenever they've been able to open up the Chinese market for something, it usually does sell a ton of tickets. So I think that's part of why the success of that ended up being as large as it became, because I don't think domestically that the film, like, it wasn't a flop, but it wasn't on the same level of some other recent Disney classics. Let's say, like, Encanto was a bigger deal, and Frozen is obviously a much bigger deal for the Disney animation side of it, as opposed to Pixar, because right now Pixar feels a little bit stagnant, with the exception being kind of Inside Out 2 and some of its other legacy sequels. Like, obviously we have a Toy Story 5 coming this year. So overall, I'm still at an 8, but I don't think there's a ton of difference between the two of us. Whenever you're ready, Ryan.
In total, it was a good film. Really good film. I'd give it like a 6 or 7. Of course, I'm joking. I'd give it like an 8. Yeah.
Okay. So that is a 7.83 average between the three of us. Let's move to impact and significance. This is a measurement of the same basic proportions as the previous category, except instead of measuring it from the 5-year mark after it was released until today, we are measuring the initial 5 years, still 5 and 5 points apiece between the same two groups, the industry and the audience. I have this at 4.5 for both categories. I think the fact that it was nominated, maybe not as much as some other nominated animated classics. Like we had talked about, I think WALL-E got into a couple of other categories like story writing, and we talked about Up and WALL-E getting nominated for Best Picture. This is not quite on that level, but the fact that it did win Best Animated Feature in its given year at least puts it at a 4.5 for me on the industry recognition. The critics being fairly positive across the board, it having obviously enough backing to get a sequel eventually, but 10 years later. I think that it has enough support to at least establish a 4.5, but it's not quite at that 5 level for me. As far as public support, it's not going to be at a 5 because it's not like one of the highest grossing films of its particular year, even though the sequel did very, very well box office wise. Ultimately, you're still having to compete with the fact that it finished 4th in its given year and 2nd for an animated film from the same studio. Now, mind you, Finding Dory, given the legacy sequel nature of it, I think was always going to be a slightly bigger draw than something that was original, but I still have that at a 4.5. I think people went out to see it in granted, a very decent year for the box office, but ultimately I have to knock it down a half peg. So I'm at a 9.
Okay, I agree with you on the industry. From the public, on a $150 million budget, $1 billion,
and it was only the 5th animated film to ever reach that mark.
Yeah, well, and the point being is that I'm looking at this and I'm going, it was a hell of a lot more popular than Bob Iger, and apparently it did enough to help prop up Disney's profits for that period of time. I've got to give it a 5 on that because I think it's, I mean, the ratio of box office and popularity at the time in comparison to other, yeah, sure, it wasn't even the biggest of that year, but still, I mean, those were 2 blockbusters that were in the arsenal of Disney, providing a basis for them and a huge profit. So I'm going to go with a 5. So I'm at a 9.5.
I'd give it also a 5. I know nothing about box office, but bringing a $150 budget to $1 billion is pretty impressive in my opinion. It was a pretty good movie, so I'd have to give it a 5 too.
Okay, and for industry?
Well, yeah, I'd have to give it, yeah. I know nothing about industry either, but I think Finding Dory was terrible. I think it deserved higher up, but yeah.
Okay, so you have a 5, and what for industry? You got to get it out of 10.
Oh, out of 10? 4.
Okay, so you have a 9. All right. So that's a 9.17 between the three of us. Novelty for this one. This is a measure of anything original about the film in its totality. It could be about the story, which is usually where we apply it, but it could be in a lot of other places as well. And then the execution for the film as a whole, all the technical aspects, all the acting, etc. How does that impact the movie overall? 5 and 5 points apiece between those two subsets of this one category for a total of 10. I guess I will go first here because, Dad, you usually lead off the next category. I would say from an originality standpoint, it feels a little fresh, but it is still borrowing from some fairly familiar genres in order to make, I think, a hard topic softer, as we kind of mentioned early on in this discussion. I think that it's borrowing from detective stories. It's borrowing from some noir elements. It's certainly borrowing from science fiction fantasy for a lot of the film and its storytelling elements by humanizing a lot of the characters and then bringing in some of the biological. I think that's creative enough to give it a 3, but I stop about that point. However, I do think this is a fairly well executed film. The only critiques that I would have is that I think the story is a little bit too clever at times and a little bit more convoluted. There are parts in this story that it feels like it wants to tell one story, but it's also weaving like multiple different narratives throughout. So are we focusing mostly on the racism aspect? Or are we focusing on the beat cop aspect? Or are we focusing on overcoming adversity and challenges? It just doesn't, for me, seem to narrow in on one thing, and it tries to accomplish a lot without the most focus. And so I'm going to dock it just slightly, and I'm going to say this is a 4 for me. So I have a 7 overall.
All right. For originality, this is Lethal Weapon meets Bugs Bunny meets Mississippi Burning.
I could follow you up until the last one.
Well, I couldn't think of a traditional racism. Okay, how about Heat of the Night?
Sure. Okay.
So it's not that unique. So I'm at a 3 for originality.
Well, hold on.
It did, and I'll go with 3.5 because I think it does. The combination is good.
But putting it in this medium, this delivery system, and this genre of animation, like ultimately I went with a 3. So my score is technically lower than yours at this point. But I would just say that don't limit it to whether or not the story has been done, but whether it's been delivered in this way and to this intended audience then.
Except that you have other buddy stories that are animated as well. So
well, okay, sure. But then we're going, like, you can't tell me that you're fitting Finding Nemo and this into the same story just because they're buddy films.
No, because there's other aspects. So I've already laid it out, and I'm higher than you. So I don't know what you're complaining about.
I'm not complaining. I'm asking you to be consistent.
Oh. So you're pointing out my inconsistencies because I'm higher than you?
Yes.
Okay.
What are you, a federal judge now?
Makes perfect sense to me.
If there's no harm established, then it must not be a problem.
No, if I was a federal judge, I'd just go, well, your opinion is irrelevant and I don't need to consider it because I'm better than you. But anyway.
No, that's fair. Yeah.
So anyway, going on to the other portion of this, which is execution. Yeah, it was well executed. I liked the story. I liked the combination. I liked how it was presented. I think it was done well. It was done to entertain children, but it had a meaning, and it gave an opportunity for parents to use the opportunity to have good in-depth conversations with their children about inclusion, tolerance, respect. So I'm going to go with a 4.5. It was a little flawed because there were certain parts that were not perfect, could have been done better or been a little less heavy-handed at times and a little less obvious at times. So I'm going to go with a 3.5 and a 4.5, so I'm at an 8.
For originality, I'd give it a 4. I don't think I've ever seen a movie bring animation and kid stuff into racism and stereotypes and things like that. So for originality, I'd have to give it a 4.
Okay.
And I think it was executed really well. The story was great. Again, kid and hard meaning into a show is hard to execute, and I think they executed that very well. So I'd also give that a 5.
Okay. Well, that makes the math simple. That's going to be an 8 average between the three of us. Let's move to Classicness, which I would say anytime we do one of these more recent movies, it's always difficult to really get a great Classicness score because we can't add on some of the points that we normally do. This category is usually made for movies that are much older, at least a few decades, and have some age spots on them. But in this case, classicness is derived to be about how well a movie has aged or not. And as such, we start, instead of our normal baseline being in the median of a 5, at a 6 here, because it's easier to take points off than it is to add points on, particularly for a newer film as we've had right here. So with that, this category lives in the gray, and we turn it over first to our senior, and I put an emphasis on senior here, nuance correspondent, Dana.
Yeah. Anyway, let's start with the fact that we have a small, diminutive character who is a woman or female character, which is unique. So that in and of itself is a point up for me. It does hold well because not only is it talking about issues of tolerance and intolerance and acceptance or non-acceptance of race, but it also points out how easily people can be manipulated by political means along those lines. So I'm giving that full point up for that as well. So I'm at an 8.
I have the same score for basically the same reasons, so no need to belabor the point. I'll go with an 8 as well.
I have an 8 for the same reasons too.
All right, so that makes it an easy 8 average between the three of us. Finally, we get to rewatchability. Insert your own subjective test here. This is a category anywhere between 1 to 10, and we usually start with our guest. So, Ryan, how rewatchable is this film for you?
Very rewatchable. I think it's an entertaining and funny show, and also teaches, racism stuff. So I think it's very rewatchable.
Okay, so how would you assess that 1 through 10?
I said 9.
Okay.
I would possibly go higher than the number I'm going to give. And the only reason I'm giving the number a little lower than I normally would is that it's a film I would encourage people to watch. I would like to watch it again myself, quite frankly. But getting others to watch is going to be a little bit more difficult because it's considered a children's movie and animated. So it's going to be a little harder to get people to rewatch. But the point of the film and how it was portrayed is such an extent that I think it minimally needs a 7, and that's where I am.
And that's where I am as well, for basically the same reasons. Ultimately, I think that animation is often dismissed as an art form, and particularly as a film form, when I think there's a lot of good animation for adults that has been done. We've done some very good animated films on the show, and I think that what's been proven over time, even though it may be translatable to children, movies like WALL-E, I think, have much deeper themes than even children can understand in the time, and I think it's a much headier film. Soul is another example of that. Inside Out. Yeah. They're all films that can be translated to children, but they're also there as just purely good forms of art that can be understood deeper by the parents that are taking the children. It's not like Frozen, where it's just catchy songs, or for that matter, K-pop Demon Hunters. And so by that extension, I do think that you're going to have a hard time introducing people, but I think once they've seen it, to me, I would think this is less of a sell for parents to rewatch this film than it is to watch Frozen or Encanto for the 100th time. And so I end up at the same 7 that you have.
I know this will be hard for you to fathom, but I think it's a little bit more rewatchable than, say, Peter Pan, which has certain race problems.
It is not a movie that has aged well, no. So that takes us to our final category of the evening, audience score. For this one, we had an 86% for Google users and a 92% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.9. So to repeat the categories, we had a 7.83 for Legacy, a 9.17 for Impact and Significance, an 8 for Novelty, an 8 for Classicness, a 7.67 for rewatchability, and an 8.9 for audience score, giving us a final total of 49.57, and currently placing it on our list between It's a Wonderful Life and The Third Man for number 82 on the film list.
I would have thought it'd been a little higher, but okay.
I mean, we kind of tapped out. I think Inside Out is very, very high. I'm trying to think what else. I thought we had something else recently that was also extremely high. Inside Out is currently at number 19. Toy Story is at 21. So, I mean, we've done justice by this entire genre. I don't think we've been dismissive of it. I think we've done a good job by two particular genres, animation and horror, and for that matter, comedy, that have been often overlooked as some of the greatest films. So, as always, if you disagree with any of our scoring, you can certainly write us at any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, wherever we're available. We're pretty much on every major social media outlet at this point. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, TikTok, Threads. I don't know. There's probably something else out there and I'm forgetting it, but that's okay. Or you can write us at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at our email, greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com.
I think I've thought about advertising us on the side of a barn on Highway 10 near Appleton.
Well, I mean, there are worse ways to get the word out. Remaining questions for this one. How was the predator target list determined? It just seemed quite random, like there's a predator over here and we're just going to shoot a dart at it.
I went back through and tried to figure it out. It doesn't make any sense.
I think it is supposed to be quite random, but I didn't really have a ton of remaining questions for this one. That was the only one I really had because I think for the most part, it wraps up pretty well. And for any loose threads that are still there that you might have, it's basically contained in the sequel now. So I don't have a whole lot.
The sheep mare, and I can't remember her name.
Bellwether.
Yeah, ultimately what ended up happening to her would be my only remaining question.
But that's answered in the sequel.
Huh?
But that's answered in the sequel.
It is?
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but I thought maybe she just got put out to pasture.
Nope, she's in jail. And then she comes back, and I think the final moment of the film is them putting her back in jail after the prison break. Spoiler alert for the new movie.
Yeah. So you didn't like my joke?
Just moving past it. So any remaining questions for either of you? Hearing none, Ryan, I'd like to thank you for being on with us for your first time. We hope that you enjoyed yourself. Is there anything that you'd like to add yet?
No.
All right. Well, you can continue to catch us wherever you have before, and we hope that you continue to enjoy the show. Thank you again for being on with us. We enjoyed having you. Dad, any remaining thoughts for the week?
I did go through the list, and I am 15 films from having about 95% of the Academy Award nominations done.
Okay. 15 films is a lot of films.
Yeah, but it's a couple of them are documentaries and there's a couple of the animated, and they'll go fairly quick, so I'm not too concerned. I have a feeling I will be able to finish them within the time frame and still have St. Elmo's Fire done.
Well, you better get it done because I've already thought of what the punishment would be if you didn't.
Yeah.
Maybe you can have your pickles from your other bet that you haven't paid off after 3 years.
Pickles.
Ugh.
Okay. So as I mentioned last week, I am working currently on a new series of content that is coming shortly. We're going to be working on something that I haven't really talked to too many people about. And I am hoping that it ends up burgeoning into something a little bit more, but it's an area in which I've wanted to express myself in a way for a long time and has to do with TV. So I'll just throw that teaser out there. And if you have some questions. Eventually, they will be answered here. We're going to try and put something together here in the next couple of weeks and get that out to everybody. But otherwise, as always, just rate, follow, review, and follow us on all of the social media stuff. I'm going to have some teasers out here, I would assume, in the near future. But otherwise, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Next week, for our 302nd episode, we welcome our returning celebrity guest, Kristen Battistella, to the show to discuss the classic Western The Searchers from 1956, celebrating its 70th anniversary. Directed by John Ford, written by Frank S. Nugent. Cinematography by Winton C. Hoke. Music by Max Steiner. Editing by Jack Murray. Starring John Wayne, Jeffrey Hunter, Vera Miles, Ward Bond, and Natalie Wood. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GMOATPodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ryan Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.